outside in this weather. Not boots. Sneakers. Soaked dark at the toe. Left lace coming undone. The sole already beginning to separate at the front edge. A dark gray knit cap sat crooked on her head, too thin for the wind and damp along the rim, as if it had already lost more warmth than it could give. She had her right fist pressed flat against her stomach, holding something, a piece of paper. Folded or crumpled, held there the way you hold something you aren't sure you're allowed to have. She was standing very still. That was the first thing he actually noticed. Not the sneakers. Not the vest, just the stillness. Most kids can't hold still in cold weather. They shift their weight, hug themselves, stomp their feet, complain out loud. This girl was doing none of that. She was watching the road. He went inside. Coffee from the self-serve, cream, no sugar. The same cup he'd been making for 20-some years. The store smelled like burned hot dog rollers and pine cleaner, and something faintly sweet from a candy display near the door. He was reaching for a lid when he glanced through the window, and she was still there. Same spot, same stillness. A customer pushed out the door, and a fresh gust swept the lot. The girl pulled her chin down into the vest collar. That was all. No sound. No look around. He found the charger cable in the back aisle and took his time getting to the register. Outside, he stopped. A dark blue pickup had been parked near the road when he pulled in. Older model. One headlight sitting lower than the other. He'd noticed it the way you notice something you aren't looking at. The space was empty now. The tire tracks at the lot exit cut deep into the new snow and ran fast. The kind you leave when you pull out without checking the mirror. 2 other cars in the lot. A minivan with a woman loading grocery bags. A toddler balanced on her hip. An older sedan by the air pump. Driver still inside. Neither one paying attention to the girl by the freezer. He stood there. Her father had probably just run to the next lot for something, he told himself. Or a family argument. Christmas Eve was nobody's best day. A stranger walking up to another man's child on a holiday night could go sideways fast. It wasn't always help. Sometimes it was only interference wearing a more presentable coat. He pulled out his keys. Then the store door opened again. The cold moved across the lot, and the girl flinched, one pull of her shoulders. Nothing more. But what stopped Daniel wasn't the flinch itself, it was the reset that followed it. She didn't look toward the road where the truck had gone. She didn't look at the cars, or the store, or him. She just straightened up, pressed the piece of paper harder against her stomach, and went still again. Eyes back on the road, on the bend where the headlights had disappeared. He put his keys away. He walked over slowly and stopped a few feet back, dropping his shoulders so he wasn't standing over her. She looked up at him, not frightened, but measuring, taking careful stock. "You waiting on somebody?" he asked. "My dad," she said. "He coming back soon?" She looked at the road, let the question go. Up close, her ears had gone red, and her sneakers were soaked through at the toe. He could see what she was holding now. A piece of paper, off-white, folded and refolded, the edges soft from handling. She had it pressed against her middle like something carried a long distance. "Okay," he said. "I'll wait a minute with you." She didn't say yes or no. She turned back to the road. He leaned against the building wall with enough room between them not to crowd her, and drank his coffee, and didn't say anything else. After a moment, she glanced at him, quick and sideways and careful, then looked away. The wind cut across the lot. She set her jaw against it and stayed put. He finished his coffee. No headlights came back around the bend. He walked to his truck and got in and turned the key. The heater knocked on, through the windshield in the pale lot light. She was still standing in the same spot, fist against her stomach, eyes on the road. Then her lips moved. He had the window cracked just enough. "He'll come back after he cools off." Not to Daniel. Not to anyone. Said quiet and level to the empty road ahead of her. The way you say something you've said so many times it stopped being hope a long while ago and became something else. Something you repeat because letting go of it feels worse than the cold. Daniel sat still. He took the key back out of the ignition and set it on the seat beside him. Daniel didn't rush back across the lot. He left the truck door open so it wouldn't slam, and walked at the pace of a man with a simple errand and nowhere particular to be. He stopped a few feet from her and crouched down to even out their heights. "There's hot chocolate inside," he said. "You want some?" She looked at him. "Then at the store, then back at the road." "I'm okay," she said. "All right." He stood. "I'm going back in anyway." He got the hot chocolate first, foam cup, lid on. Then a grilled cheese from the warming unit, the kind that had been sitting long enough to firm up on the outside. He passed the sock rack near the register and pulled a pair of gray wool ones off the peg without giving it much thought. At the counter, he asked the clerk, the young woman with the Santa pin on her vest, whether she'd noticed the dark blue pickup that had been parked near the road earlier. She had. The man came in around 5:30, bought a six-pack and a box of crackers. She'd seen the girl outside and assumed she was with him, assumed somebody was watching. Did he sign anything? Daniel asked. She pulled the receipt tape and read it twice. Dale Hensley. Card was declined, though. He paid cash after. Daniel thanked her and went back out. He set the grilled cheese on the freezer ledge, within reach but not pushed on her. He held out the cup. Nothing in it, he said. Just chocolate. She looked at the cup, then at his hands, then at his face. He kept his expression plain, not warm, not pressing. Just a man standing in a cold parking lot, waiting on her to decide whatever she needed to decide. She took it with both hands and held it without drinking. When he unzipped his coat and held it out, she went still. She looked at the coat, then at his hands, then back at his face, not frightened, but working through something. Taking her time with it the way a person does when they have learned that things offered freely sometimes turn out not to be free. He waited. She reached out and took the coat and draped it over her shoulders without putting her arms through. He stepped a few feet off and made a call. He'd had Margaret Hale's number for a few years. She ran Hope Harbor Shelter about 11 miles east off the county road, and he'd sent money her way more than once without ever going over to see the place. She picked up fast. He told her what he had. A girl, maybe 9. Left at Stovall's off Route 30. No parent in sight, cold and holding herself together. Margaret asked one question. How was the girl carrying herself? He thought about it for a second, like she's done this before. A short pause on her end. Come ahead. He pulled onto the highway and ran the heat high. Sophie sat in the passenger seat with his coat across her lap and the paper still in her fist. She ate about half the grilled cheese in slow. Even bites, not the way a hungry child usually eats, which is fast and a little single-minded, but steadily, like she was spacing it out without making a decision to. When the hot chocolate had cooled enough, she drank it one careful sip at a time. She didn't spill any. She didn't ask how much farther. He didn't ask her anything, either. He wasn't entirely sure what the right thing to say was, and he'd learned a long time ago that silence was better than filling space badly. Hope Harbor was a converted 2-story house at the end of a county road, added onto in pieces over the years with no particular plan. The porch light was on. Margaret met them at the side door, a solid woman with close-cropped gray hair and a cardigan that had been washed many times. She didn't make anything of the hour. She stepped back and let them in. She showed Sophie the bathroom, the coat hooks, the dorm room at the end of the hall, 2 beds, clean sheets, a reading lamp with a low bulb. Sophie looked at the room from the doorway before she went in. Margaret put soup on the kitchen table a few minutes later. Chicken broth with noodles, going since mid-afternoon by the smell of it. Sophie ate the whole bowl without lifting her eyes. She pulled the bread apart and soaked it before eating it that way, too. When the bowl was empty, she sat back and kept her hands in her lap. She had not taken her shoes off. Margaret noticed and didn't say anything about it. She came into the hall where Daniel was standing. She answers to Sophie without any hesitation, she said, keeping her voice down. Last name? She went quiet. A pause. She had a paper ornament in her hand when she came in. I asked if I could look at it. It's been repaired. Clear tape. At least twice. Careful repairs. Like somebody cared whether it held together. She said it plainly, and left it there. Daniel stepped into the front room and called Officer Ray Collins, who handled family welfare checks for the county. Ray had a flat, unhurried voice and said he'd be there inside an hour. He made it in 40 minutes. He knocked once, came in quietly, and sat across from Sophie at the kitchen table with a legal pad he barely opened. He started with easy thing, whether she'd been to a shelter before, what grade she was in. She said she hadn't been to one like this. She said the grade depended on the school. Ray didn't blink. He let a little time go by before he asked for her full name. Sophie had set the paper angel on the table in front of her while they talked, unfolded, almost flat. The tape repairs visible now along the old fold lines. The paper worn soft at the edges. She looked at it, then up at Ray. Sophie, she said, and quieter still. Which one? Ray's pen stopped over the notepad. From the doorway, Daniel caught Margaret's eye. The kitchen was warm. The soup pot was still on the stove with the lid ajar outside. Snow had been falling long enough to cover the road and the lot and the bend of the highway where a dark blue pickup had driven off into the dark. Sophie sat with her hands folded on the table. watching Ray's face with the patient. Careful attention of someone who had learned that the wrong answer, given to the wrong person, could cost you something you wouldn't get back. Margaret checked on Sophie at midnight. The girl was asleep on her side, still in her clothes, facing the door. Her shoes were on the floor directly beside the bed, not kicked off, not pushed away, but set down in exactly the position for someone who might need them fast. Her hand rested near the edge of the pillow, close to where she'd tucked the paper angel before lying down, not under it. Inside the case, reachable. Margaret stood in the doorway for a moment and then went back down the hall without making a sound. Daniel was still at the kitchen table with Ray Collins, a cold cup of coffee, and a small spread of printed pages that had come through on Ray's work phone in the hour since they'd been sitting there. The overhead light in the kitchen was a little harsh for this time of night, and nobody had done anything about it. The name Sophia Delaney appeared in a school enrollment record from a district outside Zanesville, filed 3 years back, before the record stopped entirely. The same name came up in a pediatric clinic file that had gone quiet after a patient listed as Laura Delaney. Mother missed a follow-up appointment and didn't respond to outreach. The clinic had flagged it once. Then caseloads moved on. Laura Delaney had died 3 years ago. Cardiac event. She was 31 years old. Ray set that page aside. He didn't say anything for a moment. The man who'd driven the dark blue pickup had used at least 2 other names besides Dale Hensley, one attached to a rental agreement in a neighboring county, one that turned up on a lease that had ended with no forwarding address. Ray was still tracing it. What the records made, laid out across that oilcloth table, was not a clean story. It was a gap and fragment picture, a county here, a school there, a lease broken, a pediatric note left unanswered. Then a long silence of a child who hadn't held the same name, the same school, or the same roof for any significant stretch in 3 years. Each time the paperwork started accumulating toward something, the man with the truck found somewhere new to land. Sophie had been enrolled in schools, but just long enough. Long enough to look like a family between addresses. Not long enough for anyone to learn her well. Daniel looked at the pages and then looked away from them. "Does she know we're finding this?" he asked. "She doesn't know what we have," Ray said, "and I'd like to keep it that way until we know more." Margaret came back to the table and sat down. "She took crackers at supper," she said. 2 extra ones. Pressed them under her pillowcase when she thought the room was clear.